life as a new housewife is very hard, but we have to have guests still. I'm your host, Lynn, and let's dress to impress. So, you're a new housewife and you don't exactly know what you're doing. Well, don't let inexperience stop you. I have just the book for you. Cre-Frydd's Family Fare, the young housewife's daily assistance on all matters is exactly what it says it is. It helps you do any young woman's or housewife's jobs, mainly giving the prices and how to cook things. It says any competent chef should be able to read these recipes and do them correctly. Now, today I will be making roasted sirloin and pineapple pudding from this book. The fares is exactly how much it's going to cost. This is for one small family and 2 servants. This is going to be about 6 people. And think about this. I doubled the recipe on the pineapple pudding without thinking, and it made way too much. We'll talk about that later. Today I made roasted sirloin and pineapple pudding. I will start off by reading the recipes from the books and then go into detail about how I did them. Let's start with the beef. Beef should be kept a week or 10 days when weather will permit. Wipe the joint with a clean cloth, envelope it in thin paper, thickly spread with sweet beef drippings. Place the screen, putting down the beef. Hang the joint before the fire the first quarter of an hour near the base, then withdraw it to a distance. Let it roast slowly till done. Baste frequently from commencement. Half an hour before serving, take off the paper, dredge the beef slightly with baked flour, and baste it in 2 ounces of dissolved butter. Place the beef on a hot dish, pour the drippings off, add a teacup of boiling water and a half saltspoon of salt to the gravy drippings, and from the beef, pour it into a dish, garnish with horseradish, and serve at once. The time as follows: to be underdone, 11 minutes to the pound, with the gravy in, 14 minutes. To be well done through, 11 minutes to the pound, with the gravy 14 minutes to the pound. In frosty weather, add 2 minutes to the pound in each case. So 17 minutes to be well done, and 11 minutes to be underdone, 14 minutes to be medium rare. Note: horseradish scraped or grated or made into a sauce as follows should always be served with roast beef. I wasn't able to make the horseradish exactly, but I will read the recipe. Wash a good stick of horseradish, scrape off the outside, and grate into a powder and put into a sauce tureen. With a saltspoon of flour mustard, a half saltspoon of dried salt, half grain of cayenne, and 4 tablespoons of good sweet cream. Mix well, then add by degree 2 tablespoons of French vinegar or strained lemon juice. Note: the yolk of 1 egg and 3 tablespoons of lukewarm oil may be substituted for cream. Now, obvious changes I had to make. I could not let my beef sit, but I was able to use an actual fire that I did have burning for a half hour beforehand. Now, the joint of meat I got very hooked up on. I went from untying and tying and then enveloping. There's a good 30-second time-lapse clip of me just walking around with a beef, trying to figure out what to do with it. Eventually, my dad came over and helped me tie it with some unwaxed floss, so that it would make an even shape. Though it did fall off, but was able to keep its shape anyway. I wasn't able to find a whole horseradish root, but I was able to find grated horseradish. Flour of mustard is mustard powder or ground mustard, which you can find almost anywhere. A salt spoon is about 1/4 of a teaspoon, and a grain is about a pinch. So those are the measurements you need. So I don't have full time lapses today because, well, I was tending to an actual fire.
I'm lighting a fire now.
Nope. Which was interesting, and I haven't really used it before, so it was kind of an experiment. So there's no time lapse. Well, there's like 3 time lapse of me running around holding beef, which is not very fun. Now, instead of beef drippings, I used salted butter, which I did thickly slather some parchment paper to envelope it in. Now, near the base, for the first quarter of an hour, I simply moved my tray that I was baking on lower, and then, after the 15 minutes, moved it up higher, basting every 15 minutes afterwards. After the first 15 minutes, my paper burned off because I forgot to put down a tray to prevent the fire from coming and getting it. But it turned out fine. Baked flour. Baked flour, you can just put a cup of flour on a baking sheet and put it in the oven at 350 for 5 minutes. The beef drippings, I wasn't able to make the gravy simply because my beef drippings all burnt at the end, or were simply just not enough, because sirloin is a lean cut of beef, so there's not a lot of fat to get fat drippings. I cooked it 14 minutes to the pound to get a medium rare. While that is roasting, let's start with the pineapple pudding. The recipe says, rub 6 ounces of crumbled stale pound cake to powder, cut 6 ounces of preserved pineapple into quarter-inch pieces, beat 6 fresh eggs mixed together, add an ounce of sifted loaf sugar, a half of gill of new milk, and a half gill of cream. Beat well for 15 minutes. Butter a mold and put in the mixture and tie it over with wrapped writing paper. Spread with butter and steam over a fast boiling water for an hour and a half. Turn out carefully and serve with the following sauce in the dish. Put into a small saucepan 4 tablespoons of pineapple syrup, 2 tablespoons of apple jelly, a teaspoon of sifted sugar, and a wine glass full of cold water. Moisten a teaspoon of arrowroot with a little cold water and mix into the syrup while boiling hot. Stir over the fire for 2 minutes and add a tablespoon of rum and serve. Now, there's a couple of pieces that I couldn't really do exactly. I didn't have stale pound cake, so I got semi-old pound cake from Walmart and simply dehydrated it in my toaster oven while waiting. Pineapple syrup I couldn't find for the life of me, so I just took some canned pineapple, which is what I use as preserved pineapple, into a saucepan with about a cup of sugar, and let that cook over for a couple of minutes. And it did get thick. Now, loaf sugar is a type of sugar that is melted down and put into a loaf. It's kind of like what you do for sugar cubes, but in a whole loaf. I had to replace this with simply graduated sugar. Now, some measurements that might be a little bit confusing is a gill. A gill is a pint, and that is said in the preface. And for the writing paper, I used parchment or wax paper. I can't remember which now. And tied it over with some yarn. I used a steamer pot for to steam it for the hour. As mentioned before, I doubled this recipe. You don't need to double this. I had 2 about this sized loaf pans, pretty decorated loaf pans, and it filled those, and I still have half a bowl of mixture left sitting in my fridge that I need to do something with. And the rum, I'm not of legal age to buy rum, so I used a tiny bit, I think like a half teaspoon of rum extract. And it was very delightful. Oh, and new milk, I cannot get new milk. That is against the law. New milk can get you very sick, and that's why it's against the law, so I just used whole milk because I felt that was the most accurate. If you are able to buy raw milk, I feel like that might be the best, but still questionable at best, health-wise. Oh, and a wine glass full of cold water. I got an actual wine glass and just filled it to the top with water. I think this was too much. I think they just wanted me to do it a little bit, or they had smaller glasses, because mine was very liquidy. So this was a term of thickening. Let me tell you a little about pudding. Now, you may think it's weird that I'm steaming a pudding. American puddings aren't usually steamed, but English puddings are. They're kind of a mix between custard, or like a pudding that we know it, and a cake. It's kind of semi-dense, semi-not. It holds its shape, but is still jiggly. The history of the typical English pudding goes back to the Middle Ages, around 305, where most savory puddings contained meats and that were cooked in animal stomachs. There still is savory puddings. Something called black and white pudding is basically what was cooked in the Middle Ages in England. There's also sweet variations with nuts and dried fruit. Now, you may know a Christmas carol that has carolers demanding someone bring them figgy pudding, which is basically just another word for Christmas pudding, which is a variation of one of the sweet puddings, which has dried nuts, raisins, and other things. It is a very interesting history about the Christmas pudding specifically, so if you're ever interested in looking that up, I would recommend it. The one that I made today is similar to a bread pudding because it contains stale bread, or in this case, cake. Bread pudding is basically a dish that is bread pudding mixed with eggs and other things, and baked and usually served with a caramel sauce. Now, in the words of Brian David Gilbert, I kind of just made sweet eggs. It's mostly just eggs and sugar. It is very good though. This roast was delicious and this pudding was delicious. I don't have it here with me because, well, we ate it. But the roast, to quote my mother, is one of the best roasts she has ever had, and really wants me to do it again, but though it might not be worth the trouble. It was a $25 thing of sirloin, and then also including all the other ingredients that I had to buy. It was quite expensive. This makes sense because this is a meal for a middle class family, someone who could afford to pay servants and, wasn't a servant themselves. The pineapple pudding, it's not as sweet as what most people expect. There is very little sugar in it, but the pound cake does make it a little bit sweeter. My mother said I should bring the pineapple syrup. This is not the sauce, but the pineapple syrup that I put in the sauce to go with it because it was much sweeter and had bigger pineapple chunks to put on top. And my mom liked that, having the bigger fibrous pieces. Overall, I would call this a lordly dish at its finest. It was very juicy. If I had a fattier piece of meat, I'm sure that I would be able to make the gravy. But saying that I couldn't. The horseradish sauce, I'm not a big horseradish sauce fan, but I really enjoyed this recipe. It was a lot less in your face about being horseradish than most other recipes. This might have been because it was preserved horseradish and not fresh, but it was still really enjoyable. It was a little bit thin. It would soak into the meat if you had it on your meat for a while. But I don't really see that as a problem. Just don't put too much on your beef because it is good beef, and you want to be able to savor it. So yeah, 10 out of 10, a lordly dish. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you were truly impressed. Fire? You can't even see the fire. I'm lighting a fire now. Nope. I just don't want to catch my hand on fire. It's on fire now. Wow, and now this has to sit for 30 minutes. Wow. Okay.